We're here with the Script Collective Q&A with BAFTA and Oscar-winning artist John Ottman. John, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Sure, no problem. Thank you.
You are known for your work as a director, writer, producer, editor. You've worked on X-Men 2, Apt Pupil, Bohemian Rhapsody, and many more. Can you tell us a little bit about, yourself and your origin story?
Uh, let's see, born in San Diego, moved to San Jose when I was two. No, basically, when I went to USC to be to for the dream of directing, long story short, I met Brian Singer and we did a short film together. It was like a diner kind of film where it was like it was five guys after their first semester of college, meeting back at this diner, and Ethan Hawke knew Brian as a kid, so we got him to be in the film. From that, we put a low budget film together called Public Access. The composer dropped out while I was cutting the film. I ended up scoring the film, and because I'd been doing it as a hobby, and Brian was dubious, but his back was against the wall because we had a Sundance deadline. And I was, as a hobby, I was doing all this, what he called for flowery music, because I was doing, industrial videos, quick set luck company, and like, some parking video for some friends who are doing. Anyway, but because this was
Cool.
about a sinister character and was sort of a deep score. Uh, Long story short, we won the Sundance Film Festival, and then no one had really seen someone do both those jobs, and then so when we put The Usual Suspects together, another long story, but as it was coming together, I said, look, I don't want to do this editing thing anymore. I just want to score films. And they said, you're never going to be my composer unless you're also the editor. So that's how the blackmail began, and he would absolutely admit that. And so that's why I ended up doing both the jobs, and then that grew into producing the film because I just was sort of in charge of all the departments and had to be, for various reasons. So that's my story basically, and yeah. So
I've noticed that some editors are also musicians. Have you noticed this as well? Have you heard this before, that there's a relationship?
no, but I think that the best editors have a musical sense, whether they're musicians or not, because again, this is an overused term, but it's true. If you're a storyteller, you're going to sort of have an inkling into music and in editing and script writing. I mean, it's all connected.
I hate to use the word motifs, but like, are there any Ottman tendencies?
Well, I mean, I'm sort of old school, and I like, if I can, holding on actors if I'm able to, if they don't screw up their lines, it's funny. I don't know. I don't. It's hard to answer that question really. I have a style. Sometimes you can't put your finger on it.
Sure.
But I'm not going to show a car exploding from 17 different angles and show it three times, or 10 times. I was a little guilty of The Usual Suspects. The boat explodes, and I showed it for like two different angles.
But
But
that's
um,
okay. That's all right.
but it's like, I want the film to feel real, and I don't want to feel like I don't ever want to feel like my editing is intentionally masturbating, where it's like cuts for the sake of cuts, fast cuts because it's cool. I never want to do that. If there's fast cuts, there's a reason for it. I was watching like 2 years ago, I rented Altered States and to show a friend of mine, and I was afraid it would be like, oh my God, it's gonna be terrible, blah blah. And it held up, and it's a fucking phenomenal movie. And I didn't realize watching it just how much influence it had on me, because it's full of these montages, which I became famous for with so many of our films. Even before Usual Suspects, there was this huge montage of Public Access. But I approached the montages from an intellectual point of view, where it's not just throwing images against the screen. There has to be some, in my mind at least, there has to be some justification for each shot, against another shot, trying to say something. And I watched Altered States and all these drugged out sequences and there was no CGI, of course. The editor only had editing to create these effects. And I saw how Stuart Baird was the editor, and how he was basically doing it intellectually and trying to provide meaning to his montages, and at the same time as crazy and wild as that film is editorially, that it's also extremely grounded and you know, of it's like, I mean, I grew up in the 70s, you know, I like the gritty realism of the 70s, 80s,
Hmm.
early 80s movies, and that's what I aspire to do as an editor, I guess, or a storyteller.
Sure. What are some of your favorite films?
I mean, I was watching way too much Star Trek as a kid, and so I would just watch, you know, a lot of classics passed me by. So speaking of Star Trek, too, I mean, so Alien's one of my favorite films. It's a masterpiece. Not that I even like horror films, but it's a masterpiece. Empire Strikes Back's a masterpiece. You know, then there's, then there's you know, a
You said
handful of
Aliens,
Alien.
the first one. Got it.
Alien is a roller coaster ride, a great film, but
Oh, I agree.
Alien is a
I
masterpiece.
agree. I agree.
I don't know, Taxi Driver and Jaws. I mean, pretty much anything Spielberg did, you know, back
Mhm.
then. I really kind of grew up on him and his style of filmmaking. But at the same time, Casino is one of my favorite movies, you know,
Sure.
through Scorsese. So, um, oh, but back to Star Trek 2. The reason I'm bringing it up is because I know a lot of people are writers in this forum
True.
here. And when Brian and I were making films, we would always, you know, people say, "What would Jesus do?" We'd always say, "What would Star Trek 2 do?" Because in regards to the script, because that was sort of a, you know,
Holy Grail.
well, I won't say the Holy Grail. I'm sure there's other things that are much better examples, but because that's what I was watching, Star Trek and Brian too, is what we saw. We learned from that in terms of callbacks and setting something up that comes full circle, and also, you know, underneath the surface, there's another story going on. Obviously it's a revenge film with Khan, but underneath it's a story about Kirk feeling old, and that storyline is just as provocative as the main one. And so, and callbacks, and I feel young again is really the end of is the last line of the film. It's not like I'm glad I killed that motherfucker. It's no, it's that was the story that the storyline that was the sub story that came to the surface at the end of the film. So anyway, we always would use that film as an example of, well, Star Trek 2 did this in the script, you know, and we got to do that, you know. So
One of the cool things I think about you is you wear multiple hats. I think the three main ones are composer, director, editor. Is that, would you say those are your three main hats?
yeah, yeah.
How do you approach scoring a film? When you sit down to create the
Yeah.
the musical.
Well, the music, of course, is the soul of a movie, and you got to sort of like crack what is the approach of this. I mean, I guess I'm very orchestrally traditional. However, you know, it's like if there's a film where that is not the right choice, then I'll know that and I will try to do a different style. Or there's many different styles within the orchestral context, you know. But I'll just sit with the movie over and over and watch it and feel like what makes it tick? What is this about? You know, what is the subtext that's going on here? Again, it's not what's on the screen, it's what you know is underneath. And so I would always, you know, and always score from a character point of view, you know. I would always, I mean, obviously you always have to you often will have to score something that's, you know, dictated to you on the screen, but I always try, if there's any way not to score what I'm exactly looking at, then I would do that, you
That's
know.
more interesting
um
usually.
yeah, and less is more. I mean, wall-to-wall music, it just irritates me when if I
Me
watch
too.
it. As a film composer, you
Hmm.
know, I'm like, if you can do it without a film music, do it without film music because, you know, it's unless it's a really well done score that's going to feel timeless, it's going to date the film. And that's why I didn't want to use a film score in Bohemian Rhapsody because I felt it would date the movie. So I really scored some sequences that were very emotional with the separate tracks of the Queen music. That really, now that film will never be dated, you know.
What's one of the pieces that you compose that you're most proud of?
Obviously, Usual Suspects is one of my favorite themes and so forth. But there are it's all for me always probably because I'm always just so God damn it, that no one heard that those are the things I think are my best stuff. So it's always the bomb that I wrote a score for that no one heard. I did a film called Snow White with Sigourney Weaver. It came out later as a Showtime original. Not a great film, but did some great stuff on that. And so I was really depressed, and then I stepped into my editing jail with Apt Pupil, which was a depressing movie about, a Nazi in a neighborhood. And so, anyway, that's a pretty good score too. But I don't know. Every movie has moments in it that I think are my favorite little moments. It doesn't mean the whole score is my favorite score.
Is there a computer program that you use to score?
I do Digital Performer, which is like not many people use that anymore, but it's all I know, and I hate learning new things. Once you feel secure with something,
Yeah.
you're much more creative because you don't want your mind always going to a technical thing. That's why it's very traumatic to have a MIDI studio, at least in the past, because it would never worked. It was like I always called my studio the Millennium Falcon. If I hit something, it would work, and then that thing would go off. Because back then the technology was piecemealed. It was like one program with another program, another hardware thing with another company's hardware, and I was just always in fear that when I walked in that day, it's not going to work, and that's a terrible creative environment to have. Um, yeah, but anyways, I held on to, so I still use that. But I held on to putting VHS tapes in a player, and basically writing all the notes down, the timing notes to where that things were happening on the screen, and then writing it on a piece of paper and writing to those notes, as opposed to just writing to the video as it was going by. That's the old school way, like what bar and beat does this thing happen? So I had an event list basically of the whole scene I was scoring, and then you write just the event list blind, and then you plug in the video because it's a big deal to plug in the video. It's so labor intensive, and then you watch it back like, oh wow, well, that was hitting great. But digital video had been around for at least 2 or 3 years before I just chunked my VHS players. And I'm like, oh my God, my life would have been so much easier had I used the digital video.
Have you ever used any like non-traditional instruments or props for music, or do you have a specific instrument that you enjoy using a
Oh,
lot
I've
of?
used tree branches, slamming on metal, or I mean, I've done some things. There's like an old piano that was hanging for X-Men 2, like the shell of a piano. You slap that with like a big board, it'll make this deafening sound, and it's always fun coming up with new ways of new percussion sounds and so forth. Um, but my favorite instrument is the cello because it's the most emotional instrument there is, and I always wanted to date a cello player. But it's because its range is like wide, it's from and it's so expressive. So
Let's talk a little bit about directing. What can you talk a little bit about your directing process? How when you're directing a project, are you a shot list guy? Do you like to have
yes,
everything storyboarded, or do you just kind of figure it out on
I
set?
live in fear, paranoia, and I'm a worrywart. So there's no way I'm going to go to a set and not have a shot list. It doesn't mean that I have to hold to the shot list. Things change on the day, obviously, but I couldn't walk in there not having some sort of plan. And yeah, things are roughly storyboarded with my stick figures and all that. My terrible storyboards. But yeah, on the day, you're not going to get all the shots you want. You're going to have to think on this. You're going to have to think on the fly about how am I going to consolidate the shots I want, or deep six some, and some will do the job, and obviously I scout out the location the day before, or for a few days before with the DP, and so I want to know that we're all completely familiarized with the thing, with the set, and but when you get on there, things change, and actor suddenly decides, oh, well, I want to stand over there. And you're like, no, no, no! In my head, you're supposed to stand here. Then they throw a grenade in the whole plan. Because you block with the actors, and they want to feel comfortable, and it, makes sense where they're going to walk and so forth. But you have a preconceived notion of where they're going to be sitting, where they're going to get up, and where they're going to leave. So
When it comes to editing, can you tell me little bit about, your process, your workflow? I assume you're editing from home now. or is that not true?
Actually, I've never edited a film from home. It was always somewhere. But because you have to have, actually not true. Apt People I edited from home, and I vowed never to do it again because you have a whole crew that's in your house all the time, and you can never get away from it. But I have a soapbox issue for editors. It sounds like obvious advice, but I always say watch every frame of every daily where where every eye blink was, where the actor did that. It's like you want to know where all those things are, remember them because um, uh, well, there's many reasons why. First of all, I couldn't go to bed at night knowing when I cut a scene together that I knew every single frame there was and every potential there was for the scene. And so in my mind, that scene is perfect. It's never going to change, which of course is not the case. But I want to believe that. But the other reason, which is the most important reason to do it, and look, as you're cutting a film, they're asking, can we tear down the set? Can we tear down the set? And the floods of footage is coming in and coming in, coming in. And the last thing you have the time for is to start watching footage in real time. You want to start cutting. But it's a discipline to not do that and just to sit there and watch everything in real time. And the reason I say this is because uh, is that you know with digital technology now, back in the days of film, you had to sort of preconceive the scene in your head. There's no time. You can't just throw images up like that. I mean, but just cutting one shot to another shot is labor intensive. With the splicer and the reels of film you got to put on there and everything. And so you had to watch all the dailies and let that ruminate in your head. Go to sleep, and the next day, this is the scene I want to make. It's in my head. And then you go to do it and you'll hit all the landmines because you forgot why you can't do that exactly. But so you'll either, find another way to finish to make your vision real, or if you're in a bigger budget movie, you're gonna fucking get a pickup to make that vision real. I'm gonna, you plug a slug there. I'm gonna shoot this shot. Um, and also as they shoot during the day, they can overthink things, and by take 14, or by the end of the day, where now the actor is sitting there instead of there or whatever, or they change lines and so forth, or they you might not realize that, well, actually, couple the first part of the day was better when before they changed the lines. Because the reason I say this is because I interviewed an editor one time, a very highfalutin editor who I need some help on X-Men, Days of Future Past, and I ended up hiring him. But I was like, so how do you work? He goes, well, I just take the last take and start cutting. And it's like, well, how do you know the evolution of how it got there, of how the dialogue got there, how the changes happened, and so, or how do you know that take two in combination with take 15 isn't this magical thing? How about that nose twitch? You want to get that in there. There's two ways of thought. Basically, take the last take, cut the scene, get it together, so at least have a scene, and then use the next year to sort of like find all those things. Oh, well, maybe there's something else. Maybe I can make this scene better. I just don't understand that set of mentality. I got to know that the scene is the best it's going to be, and it's going to start from that point. The reason also I cut that way is because I had a whole fucking score to write, and so I had to have a film that wasn't going to be in crisis 6 months from now. I had to have a sort of clairvoyance to know I know this scene's never going to be in the film, so I'm going to cut it out now. And so my first cuts were always within a few minutes of a running time, because I had the 125 2 hours of music to write.
And what do you edit on? Are you an Avid guy or?
Avid, because that's all I know.
I've always felt that one of the coolest John Ottman cuts was when you broke the 180-degree rule in one of the X-Men
You
films.
see, you mentioned that before, and I still don't remember what that was.
There's a shot, reverse shot scene, and there's a reveal that they're in a concentration camp space. And when we narratively reveal that, you broke the 180-degree
Huh.
rule, and we cut
I
across the
don't,
line.
yeah, I don't
Um,
remember.
so I thought that was a good example of your breaking a rule.
If that happened, it meant that there was probably limited footage, or there was they didn't shoot something the right way. And then sometimes you just do a Hail Mary and you're like, you know what? If I sit back and watch this, and be objective and I don't notice, then maybe I'll do that kind of cut. It would be usually unlikely to do that kind of cut because it would just irritate the hell out of me, and I would find another cut to go to get around it. So usually I'll move mountains to not have a cut like that. But so I don't know what that was. So
It
anyway,
worked. It worked. What are some of your thoughts on the current state of the industry?
Well, admittedly I'm a little ignorant because I'm sort of I'm rejiggering my career to just basically get films off the ground as a director, and so all of my time is spent script notes and trying to all the things you have to do, budgeting to get a film off the ground. And so I'm sort of not been in what's I haven't really been scoring and editing, and so I'm not my ear is really not to the ground except for people I do know that they all everyone it's a common thread that people are out of work. And I myself are confused by it because I see all this streaming content. It's like, well, it seems like they keep making shit. So why is that happening? So someone could probably educate me better as to what is going on and why so many people are out of work now.
It's a difficult time, but do you
Yeah.
have any thoughts on AI in the creative process?
Yeah, well, my learning lesson was to embrace new technology. And so, I use it for a variety of things. I'm using it to remaster my USC films. I'm using it to as a sounding board when I'm doing script work. It's an invaluable everything is great unless it's abused. It's like test screenings for films are invaluable, but they can be abused by the executives and the producers, all with their agenda to try to use a certain thing that someone in the audience says to basically get their way. All that can be abused. Um, and so, at the same thing with AI. I mean, I'm finding it super fun to bounce ideas off of AI, tell exactly what my problem is, and I have suggestions. And so I admit it, but again, I don't say write this scene and just say, well, there it is. I have asked it to do that, but and I'll admit it's like it'll have a scene, it's terrible, but then I love molding clay, and so then I can take it and rework it. But
Sure.
so I see it as a writer's room, and so right now in a project I'm working, I'm going back and forth between the writer, and it's funny. Neither one of us were telling each other we would use AI as our little friends, to help us out. And one day I called him on the phone and I heard a scene we were working on being read back by a computer. And I'm like, what is that voice in the background? He goes, oh, it's nothing, it's nothing, And he goes, I like to hear the screenplay read back to me. I go, bullshit, you're using AI, And so he goes, yeah, okay, I consult it, And so now it's like our relationship is great because we're both admitting, okay, let's consult our friend, And but again, I'm old school, so it's hard for me to even say this kind of stuff, even the concept of ghostwriting to me when I hear that composers, now composers have like a team of 30 people writing for them. It's like, to me, that's just like wrong on one level. Another level, I understand that has to happen because of how fast moving things are going and so forth. But that's another soapbox issue. I mean, like composers don't have really a style anymore because they have a whole factory. How can you have it? How can you feel you're hearing a John Barry score or a John Williams score, a Jerry Goldsmith score that you knew who you were listening to? And now you really don't know who you're listening to at all because it's a staff of people. I guess the same would go for screenplays if AI is used to the perversive extent, because then you're not going to have that sort of style.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for filmmakers?
My advice is it sounds trite, but a lot of people just don't do it. And it's basically I mean, if you're a new filmmaker, or a composer or an editor or whatever, it's like just say yes to everything. And because if you look back in your career, it was that piece of shit thing you did. And if you hadn't done it, then you wouldn't be where you are because someone on that film knew somebody else whose aunt was, knew an executive or whatever, or somehow the right person saw that thing, and also it teaches you how to have a good attitude because early on I was scoring some shitty projects from friends were making to learn on them and so forth. But it taught me that when I do get a shitty project, I'm going to have a good attitude about it, and my attitude's going to be I'm going to make this better. I'm going to elevate this movie. And you have to believe that. And but then you watch the movie a year later and you're like, well, that really was a shitty film. But you know, I guess I made it a little better. But but that's not true. There have been films that I've pretty much transformed with the music that were sort of written off by the studio. So you know, and I didn't really. One of them was a movie called Orphan, and it's like I didn't even tell my friends I was working on it, you know, because I was embarrassed of working on this like uh this horror movie, because the temp score was so terrible on it, it was all the you know and the crazy, you know, and it was just the film felt
Touche.
ridiculous. Yeah, yeah, so and it felt so dumb, and so I stripped it all out basically. But I yeah, so then like you know, a year later, people's like, "Oh, I didn't know you did that," and I go, well, "I didn't want to tell anybody," you know. And then it turned out people love this movie, you know, and but I taught it, but I scored it basically from the standpoint of the little girl and the daughter and the mother, you know, because that was the underneath story that was that gave it the depth.
Thank you, John.
Right. Okay. Talk to you later. Good luck, everybody.
Bye. Good night.
Bye.